welcome to another episode of Wicked Problems. Today, we're going to be joined by Andrew Gordon Brooks, who is a founding member of OWASP and also COO of a company called Secure Delivery. And we're going to be talking about product security and product quality. These are becoming ever more important in our lives and to businesses if they want to really stand out in the marketplace and provide what their customers need, because our lives, of course, are becoming ever more connected. Now, that's been true for years and years and years, but it is getting even more so with the advent of cloud, big data, IoT. Even you look at our cars now, there's so much that's connected about them. Look at everything in your house. You've got your watch, your smartwatch, your phone, your even your microwave, perhaps even your toaster. Things are connected these days. And if you don't have good quality product that does what it needs to do, that is secure, then you stand a very real risk of losing customers because your quality isn't going to be fit for purpose. So with that, I'm going to cut over to our show, and I hope you really enjoy it. Andrew, very nice to have you on the show. Welcome. Tell me a little bit about yourself, about Secure Delivery, and maybe little bit about OWASP, because I'm sure there'll be lots of people watching or listening who maybe would like to know.
Sure. So, Andrew Gordon Brooks. So, I am a co-founder of Secure Delivery. So, we are a consultancy that specialises in product security. And that was formed about 4 years ago, coming off the back of a lot of our work within the DevOps space, which had itself come from a lot of work in just general engineering and especially building agile teams and being able to do effective work for customers and trying to have that whole product conversation. But during that DevOps time, what we really figured out is that it was all well and good automating as much as possible, being as closely connected to the customer as you could be, but there was a last mile that was still getting in the way, and that was security. So the next logical step for us was to say, right, how do we, as coming from an engineering background, really look at that DevSecOps space, as it was, product security space, and see, well, what is it about AppSec that's causing so many issues? So during that time, the company is founded with Grant Ongus, who's current chairman of OWASP. We looked at the various initiatives that they have coming out of the community, and it's all really good work, and it specifies what you need to do to be good at application security from a security perspective. So they have tools like frameworks called SAM, which are Software Assurance Maturity Model, which really says, if I am going to assess you for whether or not you're delivering a secure product, what kinds of things might I look for? And also other standards like ASVS, which say, if we actually inspect your product, what are kind of the levels of things that we'd expect to see?
And this is for applications that are cloud-based only, or just anything that really is on a server somewhere that somebody's wanting to run and provide a service to somebody else?
Yeah. So OWASP is open web, right? So started off for web applications, but when we look at things like verification standards, they are covering mobile, they are covering IoT. It is just covering the products that you're building. And really, I think of it more as, again, an open product security community. So any aspect, you've got people very enthusiastic, very knowledgeable, building those frameworks and guidance for you. But it's not connecting. I mean, everyone's heard of the OWASP top 10. And a lot of the inquiries that Secure Delivery get will be referred to from, we want to know more about the OWASP top 10. What are those top things we need to look at? But when you actually then look into what is on the top 10, those things haven't changed for a very long time. So something isn't quite taking hold within the way that we deliver our software. So when we looked at the frameworks, we started analyzing what was potentially missing. It came down to a connection between what security were asking for and what the languages that engineering or delivery teams and product teams were actually using. Right. So you might have a very, very dry requirement for some specific design feature, but it wouldn't actually translate to what you were doing on the ground. So the first thing that we would do is then look at, well, what's actually being asked for? And then started breaking down from when you look at more regulation, what you start seeing is the way that those standards, those policies are set out. It's not as ad hoc. It's just there's not much consistency in the language being used. It's very clear that a lot of the times that there are different viewpoints that kind of come together. These standards and policies and frameworks evolve over time. And so there's not much in terms of consistency to really pin anything on. So the first thing we had to do is kind of look and say, right, what are the core concepts that are being asked for? And as we went through that process, we can kind of start clarifying language like, what is it to maintain, a good software design? What is it to have an incident detection process? What do these things actually mean on the ground to a developer, to an engineer, to a product owner? It then started to shape out, it really a question for some capabilities. It was just saying, as a good software engineering function, there are certain things that you should be doing. Like you should be able to recreate the way that you produce your software artifact. And you kind of look at that as from modern development and go, well, we've automated everything, haven't we? Right? We've got build pipelines in place. We've got definitions for everything we need to build, and they're executable, which means that we can actually repeat everything we do. So the question they're really asking is, have a build pipeline which is automated, which you can replicate in the case of failure. Just standard engineering practices is really all that they were going for.
One of the things that interests me here is that the internet is not new, and cloud actually isn't that new. I know a lot of people may be coming to it for the first time, but it's been around a very long time, in fact. And there's been a lot of initiatives to make cloud secure. You hear things like zero trust and various other sort of, I don't know if initiatives is the right word, but different approaches, let's say, to security that have happened over the years. Well, I'm interested in understanding from your perspective, how is this? I mean, you talked about language being a disconnect, which it is often between business and product people, and
right.
between, So I can see totally that language is a disconnect, but it's interesting that it's taken till now for people to get together and actually go, what, this is a problem that needs to be solved. And I think it's great that you guys are doing that. I think it's brilliant. I just wonder why it's not been done before, kind of thing. Or is it just that people have tried, but they weren't? Again, it was the language disconnect or something else.
So I think there's a thing. Everyone is trying. We're all trying to do it. No model is perfect. Some are useful. Yeah. And all we're trying to do is make a model that is more useful than the ones that exist, just to bridge those gaps. A lot of the focus that you'll see, especially in security, is coming from the investment that comes into security. And that investment is very much coming into the tooling space. So whenever you talk about a security problem or a quality issue, you're typically going to be faced with a wall of vendors that are going to promise to solve that problem for you. But when you look from a regulatory perspective, what it's really talking about is your way of working. They're not saying you need to pick a particular tool to do a job. Well, sometimes they do. There's a blur with how involved they're getting. But a lot of the technical solutions that you'll find will be a quality control solution. Will be something ensuring that when you've created a defect, it's found. But when it comes to actually the process perspective of saying you've got the right capabilities in place to be able to identify where those defects came from, the quality assurance process, and then get that resolved, that's typically, we're very, very quick to choose the tools. We seem kind of slow to come into the whole quality assurance side of it. And I believe as we kind of went through security and we've developed this our product security capability framework, that kind of highlighted that there's a term that's used within a lot of regulation, and a term, well, especially now, and a term that's used in a lot of software delivery methodologies, which is continuous improvement. So you've got quality, security quality, or any quality. You need right tooling in place. You need the right checks and balances to make sure that if something that is going out that's not of sufficient quality, you're able to identify it and fix it. It's that other side of the coin, which is, well, what does that continuous improvement process actually mean? What are we doing to improve the factory that's producing the products for us? And there's a big confusion, I think, within the software industry around, if you talk about who is a QA professional, we're actually talking about the process of quality control. It's actually a QC tester, right? The continuous improvement, I think, is left to us as product teams to figure out, right, if we are going to put quality gates in place, are we going to be having a reasonable discussion about how we improve our ways of working to prevent that number of defects happening again? It's not a specific defined thing. The regulation is
kind of like this. If I think about regulation, you talked about regulation there, and I think about one of the obvious ones to think about is GDPR. And one of the central tenets of GDPR is that you have to think about security from the very first moment that you're designing something, right? So you have to have it in mind right at the beginning. You can't, and it feels to me like this is essentially one of the things you're saying, right? Like, how do we make sure that we have maybe security or quality in place right from the beginning in the way that we even think about and construct and deliver things, rather than, I guess, what has been traditionally thought of as quality assurance, where, well, okay, we find the defects in production and then or just before they hit production, but we're not actually, that's maybe too late, right? Because that's failure demand in
Yeah.
effect.
I mean, it's earlier than a lot of the measures that we've had before. I mean, it's security. The biggest way that you're going to get investment in security is to have a breach. And it's never the thing that you want to happen. I mean, especially not from a customer safety perspective, but from an engineering perspective, we know that's when lots of eyes start descending on you. That's when we know that organizational scar tissue starts forming because you've had a big disaster. A trailing indicator of low quality is the fact that you've been breached. The fact that your infrastructure fell over because that anticipated demand came at the wrong moment. Like, whatever it is, these big things, big events that happen, they are trailing indicators of low quality. So that's where the quality control process has missed them, and we've got that bigger impact. So catching it at a QC perspective is better than that. But from a quality assurance perspective, you need to know what measures you're trying to hit. So if you're not deliberately measuring the quality of your software, then you're leaving yourself exposed. No matter how many tools you've put in place. Like, we might talk to clients and they'll have a lot of tools that are doing the QC for them, or they've got a test team, whatever it is. If the outputs, the feedback from those tools or those teams are not being baked back into your software, then they're going straight out to the customer anyway. So the trick is, even if you've got those capabilities in place, to know how to use them to make sure that when things are going wrong, you can identify how they got there in the first place and then resolve them.
So you're talking about early detection of quality or uplifting of quality of security within our engineering practices. I think you've been 4 years now as Secure Delivery. You've been working as part of and with OWASP. In that time, what have you developed that, I think you mentioned a framework, did you, earlier?
Yeah. So we've got the product security capability framework, which is an expression of those core engineering capabilities across 6 groups that you need to basically be able to focus on and develop in order to have the capabilities that support the quality model that regulation is actually asking for. So rather than having the fear of audit, someone's going to come along and look to see if I have a defined build process. It's just coming back to the capability that you have to actually design, implement, and automate your own build process.
Which then uplifts your confidence if somebody does come along and do an audit later on, because you've actually had it all thought through from the beginning. And just to be clear, Secure Delivery have worked to create this framework, but it's an open source one, right?
So we've been working at 4 years to get it right. And then this year, we will be open sourcing, and then the aim for us is for it to be an OWASP flagship project to sit alongside their other tools to act as that bridge between the security world and product delivery, so we can all have a shared view of what it means to be secure.
I think it's great. I think the other thing here is that you're thinking about it from the product perspective, and I wonder if that's been a perspective that's been missing until relatively recently, because we hear about things like project to product, right, where people are starting to think about things in a product centric, which really means thinking about it from the customer's perspective as well, right? So I'm thinking about my product because I'm thinking about my customer. And so presumably what this then leads to is, well, it's actually a higher quality product for the customer that's going to use it, which would then help to drive retention from a business side, I would hope.
Absolutely. I mean, as we say, we're entering uncertain economic times, and we look at delivering value, and we know that when the economy is contracting, or we're going through a few shakes, what we wanted to make sure is that our customers aren't finding a reason not to use us, right? We want to make sure that we're delivering the right value. We're not giving them any unnecessary surprises. Our applications remain performant. They remain easy to use. They solve the problem for the customer. All of these things are quality. So the value that we want to deliver to the customer is an expression of the quality model, the quality in use model for our application, which, as we know, like back from Scrum days, your product is your vehicle of value for the customer. We represent that, we build that in through quality. So we need to be able to deliberately manage the quality that we're delivering to a customer. And when we look at how we deliver that quality through those capabilities, there are three aspects that we are then looking towards. So the first one is understanding. If you're going to have a capability to do something, you have to have a sufficient level of understanding to be able to actually execute upon that. You need enough information to be able to steer that effort. You need to be able to measure it so that you can improve it. And I think, quite importantly in these times, to know when to stop improving it. Like, when are you good enough? We can't be the highest quality everything. There's a balance, to go in there. And the third aspect of it is opportunity. And opportunity comes from work management. And the arbiter of work management is typically the product owner. So when we're making decisions about what things to work on, from a qualities perspective, functional suitability, solving the problem for the customer is absolutely a very important thing to do. But it has to be done in balance with every other aspect of quality. Be it, is this particular feature going to lock us into a particular vendor and reduce our flexibility going forwards? Is this particular requirement going to require more trust? Are we going to have to put more security controls in place? But is that going to impact our usability? These are discussions that we all have, and we all know we have to have. And, every framework that I look at, every methodology does deal with quality, but there seems to be a disconnect, I think, in a lot of projects where, we are in the mode of chasing product market fit a bit longer maybe than we should have. So the tech debt word gets raised, like the things we didn't take care of is literally just, we made a quality decision. We deliberately chose to invest somewhere else.
I suppose tech debt can arise for two reasons, right? One is we intentionally decided that we would accept that tech debt because, expedience or whatever it was, but it was a conscious decision. The other is actually we didn't bake quality into our process properly in the first place, and we didn't see that there was a whole load of potential future failure demand going out that manifests itself in part, in quite great part, I would say, as tech debt, right?
I think there's two ways I would look at that. I don't like talking about tech debt, so I'm going to change the words. But managing deliberate low quality, that's a conversation the product team can have, and it's managed. And the product owner is the arbiter of that conversation. We have made a conscious choice to pursue a particular shape of a quality model. We believe that we don't need high maturity and maintainability because we haven't validated the proposition yet. It's a really reasonable, valuable discussion to have. But the other side of it is our product's just low quality. Accidentally, we've built a low quality product. That's a failing of that particular team, of that factory. There are fundamental flaws that need to be resolved if you've accidentally wandered into a low quality conversation. You
also mentioned downturn, like economic downturn. I don't know that we're in a recession per se. We might be coming to one. I don't know, but I think at the moment there's a sort of feeling that we are in a time where people are paying more attention to the economics of their businesses and looking for, let's say, improved investment returns, if that's the right phrase. Let's say it's an economic downturn just for the sake of this discussion. Do you think that quality and security have a different expectation around there's a different expectation or need for a different expectation around them in times where we have economic downturns or versus, let's say, when we have huge prosperity and everything is very liquid?
Yes. So as things are drying up, are we going to innovate our way into growth? Or is it actually, if it's a market force, then that's probably unlikely. Most of the time we're going to weather it. It's the strongest companies are the ones that are going to be more prepared, to go through that. The ones who are able to support existing customers, maybe you're not going to acquire as many new ones, who knows? But the focus is going to be down to efficiency, right? So, when you look at cheap, fast, good, right? We might say, we want to be cheap. But I don't think that's ever the case, right? What we actually want to do is say, we still want to be effective. We still want to be performant. We still want to be cost effective, but we want to look at that quality model. right? And maybe we're not going to invest in certain aspects of quality. Maybe they're not as important to the end customer. Maybe they're more important to us as a business. Maybe it's more, group policy, group risk that's coming in and giving us a lot more constraints. Maybe we want to solve some of these quality problems a different way, rather than doing that rewrite of the user interface. If it's an internal app, are you then investing in education? Like what other routes can we take to manage our quality, to make it more efficient, so that we're stabilizing, rather than either shooting for the moon or ignoring it. Because I think the danger is if you move like I think a lot of people are tempted to do, and we say we're not going to build a high quality thing anymore because we're going to focus on cost. What you're doing is you're lowering the value of your product. You're making the customer choice on their behalf, right? That first security breach that comes in, you lose trust, you lose customers. That first time the website doesn't respond fast enough, I think, well, we don't really need this. The first time you haven't got quite enough features to really solve the problem, and then you're a disposable tool at that point. So I think focusing on quality and making sure you understand what trade-offs you're making is the key to being able to cut costs without transferring loss of value back to the customer.
Because ultimately, if you transfer a loss of value to or if the customer perceives a loss of value in the product, then you will lose some customers, and you don't want to do that. And particularly not if if you are in a downturn, that's the last time you want to lose them. On the other hand, I suppose when we talk about this, what we talk about we talk about quality, obviously, but we talk about as well, you can overserve customers, right? So
yes.
You can make something so spangly and sparkly and wonderful that, yes, of course they'll buy it, but they would have actually been quite happy with something that wasn't quite as shiny. In fact, some people might not buy it because it's too shiny.
And that's always a good trade-off, a good knowledge to have, because if you are over-engineering, and it's rife, we all like to engineer. Yeah. If you are building into a quality too much, you're taking opportunity cost away from other qualities, other problems you might be solving.
So in effect, is it fair to say that over-engineering can actually be a quality issue itself?
Absolutely.
It impacts the quality because it takes that time away from other people or other products. It's actually acting as a blocker to quality for those other products.
Yeah, I think you've got to ask yourself, is this aspect of quality, is performance a differentiator for my business? Everything's comparative, right? You're existing in a market, and it's always going to be either keep pace, be the same as everyone else, or if that's the thing that's of real value to your customer, invest in it and exceed in it. Be the fastest thing. If you go into stock trading, right, and you need to move those answers around, do that processing as quickly as possible, performance is one of your highest valued qualities. Invest in that. If you're delivering retail, you've got 24 hours to get the order through and ship, right? You just need that process to happen because you've got slower processes off the back of it. Just make it good.
Another example in my head is the no one buys dial-up broadband anymore, and so if you decided to enter the broadband market and sold dial-up, you probably wouldn't get very many customers, if any at all.
No, and that's the thing. Speed. Even though they solve a lot of the speed issues with marketing, right? You don't have to solve it all with your systems. You can just tell everyone it's okay.
Yes, up to
different ways.
Up to a gigabit per second.
Up to, yeah, that's always the way to do it, isn't it? But it's the same, again, to go back on the regulatory side, your industry has particular standards for you to meet. So meet them. Yeah. Only exceed them if your customers find that a differentiator for you. And even on, the OWASP standards, they are graded in levels. A level 1, everyone should be this secure. Level 2, right now you're dealing with sensitive information. Now you need to invest a bit more. And level 3, critical, safety issue. If safety is a differentiator, go to level 3 in this particular case, but never go there just because you can.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's a bit like I'm thinking class as a service. If you think about airlines, well, we can all go economy, or we can go business, or we can go first. You don't go first just because it's there. You might do it because you've got the money, but if I'm going from London to Paris on a flight or on a train, I'm probably going to go economy because it's only an hour. It's good enough. I don't need that, and as a result, you have a load of airlines who don't even offer that class of service because they don't need to.
That's it. And it's, if we are in shaky position economically, everyone's cost conscious, So, and maybe the thing to do is to look at that minimum quality level that you're delivering for, because the majority of your customers might be opting for it. And what you want is for them to have a great experience, to stay with you long enough for them to jump onto your, the first class ticket as soon as it's economically viable for them.
Tell me about the model, the framework that you were mentioning. Just say its name again, and also let us know roughly again when it's going to be available for people to have.
So it's the Product Security Capability Framework. So it is just now going through ratification internally to make sure we're not leaking anything that we shouldn't do when it goes public. So that's all being cleaned up, and that will be out this year. And then we work with the community to ensure that that's integrated with other projects, within the open source community, not just OWASP. And then from there, coming into the summer next year, I think there'll be a lot more big bang around it as we have it ratified by the community.
So if people wanted to learn more, both about secure delivery, for secure delivery, they should go to your website, I suppose, which is securedelivery.io. Am I right?
Securedelivery.io. We did have a framework site, but that is down right now. But it'll be linked to from securedelivery.io and pointing across to OWASP once that site has moved across.
I'll make sure that once it's up and in the public domain, we'll also link it under this episode as well. And if they want to go to OWASP and find out more about OWASP, where should they?
So OWASP.org. I remember, I'll correct that if it's wrong, but OWASP.org is it, OWASP.
I will make sure that there's a link and a little bit of an explanation under here as well. Andrew, I want to thank you for your time. It's been very informative for me. It's an area that I think isn't widely appreciated, let's say, the whole quality and quality of security as an area. And I think it's high time people sort of paid attention to it, particularly, we are going down an avenue, aren't we, where everything is connected. And it's just so important for everybody to consider it.
It is. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because we do also have Product Quality Matters, is a podcast that we will be, or is launching this week, next week, whenever this comes out, where we're having conversations just like this with, many disciplines within software engineering, just to get quality conversations around how is everyone considering quality, and look to build, a community around that.
Oh, well, so we've presumably barely scratched the surface here today, and if people want to get into more depth, then they can go and watch episodes of that podcast when it's live.
The fantastic thing about quality is that anything you talk to me about, I can find a way to spin it into a quality conversation.
And it's like, I guess it's like layers of an onion as well, right? So you peel it back and there's another layer, and you peel it back and there's another layer, and occasionally it makes you cry, but like an onion does.
Yeah, I think it's been very rewarding so far, the conversations. And I think the really reassuring thing I have is that quality is considered. It's featured everywhere we go. I just think we haven't had as much attention on it in the day-to-day as we maybe should have. And as our industry matures, and things get more complex, it's a really good, nice place to come back and have some open conversations.
Well, once it's up, let me know. And what I'll do is I'll also include a link. I can put a link under there, so anybody's interested who's watched this can come back and they can look for the link if they don't already know how to find it. Andrew, thank you once again for your time. Good luck.
Thank you. Great to be here, Toby.